them here. We're talking about Boris Johnson seeing the people today. Let's have a look what's going on here.
The Tory Prime Minister winning over people in places other Tories can't. That's what his supporters tell you anyway.
People have died because of austerity, and then you've got the chiefs to come here and tell us austerity's over, and it's all good now, we're going to leave the EU and everything's going to be great. It's just a fairy tale.
A week ago, not far from here, Boris Johnson met Please Leave My Town man in Morley. Today's welcome was from Leanne in Doncaster.
You've drained Doncaster. Doncaster have had no funds from central government. Every year there's less money for Doncaster, and you have the chiefs to come here.
We've got a huge new towns fund, which is going to be giving £3.6 billion altogether. Doncaster is one of the towns that's going to be eligible. We're putting money into the NHS, we're putting money into schools, and I think there are very good times ahead.
But look at this, there are also selfies and handshakes, with promises of cash for northern towns and policy announcements you might expect from Labour. All this appears to be working for some.
At any other time in the last 50 years, this would have been inconceivable, because this is Doncaster, and that is a Conservative Prime Minister. This shouldn't happen, but you know, he's not lost. He's not stumbled into Doncaster by accident. This is a strategy, because Boris Johnson thinks he can win votes here.
But this strategy is also a gamble that Labour leavers will back him.
Would you vote for him?
I won't vote for him, no, I don't think so.
You'll shake his hand.
I'll shake his
What?
hand,
Go on, explain for me.
Yeah.
You respect him, you quite like him, you won't vote for him. Explain it.
I think he wants to take us out, and I want to go out.
But you won't vote for him?
I don't think so, no.
Why not?
I'm still Labour, to be honest.
Next stop, Rotherham, and the convention of the North in what was once a steelworks. Inside, the Prime Minister promising to give the North more power, money, and even modern trains.
I'm announcing my intention to give the railways of the North back to the people of the North.
There were promises too on Brexit.
We're working incredibly hard to get a deal. There is the rough shape of a deal to be done. I'm cautiously optimistic. How is that a good enough characterisation for the railway? I'm cautiously optimistic.
But if the PM assumes the North is just leave land and a one-size-fits-all approach will work,
Would you?
You have created. Get back to Parliament and sort it out.
I think the TV's gone off. I do apologise, guys, but we're going to try and put it back on. I hate it when the TV goes off. So, as we're just looking there,
a heckler soon
guy got dragged out there. Just going to pause it and go back to that.
The rough shape of a deal to be done. I'm cautiously optimistic. How is that a good enough characterisation for the railway?
As you're going to see, guys, if somebody gets dragged out.
The PM assumes the North is just leave land and a one-size-fits-all approach will work.
Would you?
You have created. Get back to Parliament and sort it out.
A heckler soon sets
Why has it gone off again? It keeps crashing there, guys. 2 seconds, guys. I need to put this screen back on. I'm trying to film a video, and the screen just keeps going off every time. So that part where we just saw that guy getting dragged out by the security, it's gone off again. 2 seconds.
Just leave land and a
Sorry it's taking me so long to sort this problem out with the TV.
You have created.
It's done it again. See if you guys can see here. I'm trying to get the video, what the guy getting dragged out on the thing, and the TV just will not show the video. That part. You can see in the background, he's at the back there.
Boris Johnson tried to plough on as the protester was removed, which feels a bit like a metaphor for something. When the PM's slop was up, it wasn't exactly a standing ovation. Even so, Chances are he'll be coming back to the north to see us again very soon.
Claire Fallon there. So, Mr Johnson will be in Luxembourg on Monday to meet EU officials, already claiming the rough shape of a Brexit deal is in place. It comes after the EU's chief negotiator called for concrete proposals from Downing Street. Our political correspondent Paul McNamara joins us from Westminster now. So, the rough shape of a deal, Paul?
Yeah, indeed. This is his first official visit since becoming Prime Minister to see the EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, and the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. A working lunch in Luxembourg on Monday, we're told. What can we expect? Well, probably not very much. By the way, both sides seem to be downplaying this. Yes, Mr Johnson said today there was cautious optimism and the rough shape of a deal in place. But today, Downing Street, playing it down, making the point that this is just part of ongoing face-to-face meetings the Prime Minister's having with his counterparts across Europe. In Europe too, sources on the other side of the channel saying, we've had plenty of trips from Prime Ministers and Brexit negotiators full of optimism, but look at where we still are right now. Today, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, made the point that the gap is still very wide. There was some excitement overnight, though. In the Times, they broke a story that the DUP might be softening their stance on their red lines, talk of a possible Northern Ireland-only backstop. That was slapped down straight away by the DUP leader, Arlene Foster. Their Brexit negotiator, Sammy Wilson, has been doing exactly the same all day, saying simply any deal which differentiates Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK just will not fly. But you do get some sense that both sides might just be getting closer to a deal. They might be getting closer to a deal, and part of the reason for that is Boris Johnson has spent a leadership campaign saying he will deliver Brexit by October 31st, do or die. Now, the problem is if you spend a leadership campaign giving that message, you might spend a general election campaign having that message said back to you if you don't deliver. And however you try and spin that, that's tricky. I suspect that may be sharpening his focus.
Well, it was very interesting, one would say to me.
Concerns about the direction of travel. I was the first to highlight the problem of the membership change. The membership of my former Conservative Association has virtually doubled in the last year. They haven't joined because we've been a one-nation Conservative party. They will have joined for the purpose of securing Brexit and, in some cases, to get rid of me.
Can we just do
so
that point?
So I think, unfortunately, and I say this, I'm genuinely sad after 27 years of party membership at every level. I think that this battle, I did get a year of my life to try to fight this and to try to get to a second referendum for the national interest, but also...
Nobody wants a second referendum. It really gets me angry, guys. I don't know about you guys that follow politics. It's all they ever talk about is second referendum. We've done the referendum. We've made our mind up. And they keep going around in a circle again and again. It's irritating.
So it's like
you can see his point, can't you, Damien? You've got some sympathy with that, haven't you?
Well, I've got sympathy with the point of trying to attract back one nation Conservatives who may want to drift away over the Brexit issue. Absolutely, some of my closest friends are very worried about that and disagree with the government.
Some of them left the party
on Brexit. Yeah, some of them left the party. Well, some
beyond this building.
Yes, indeed. And of course, I want them to rejoin the party. And in a sense, more importantly, I think that Brexit is this huge, overwhelming issue which for decades has been divisive in the Conservative Party and is divisive in all political parties. And people talk about a party realignment, but for as long as we have a first past the post electoral system, then and we need a centre-right party, and that party is the Conservative Party, then it seems to me that post-Brexit, it is very important for that party, the Conservative Party, to be very significantly a one-nation party to appeal to people who believe in free markets but are also social liberals and so on.
But can you be the party of Brexit, which Boris Johnson has clearly decided the party must be at this moment, it's Brexit or die, and tack back towards the centre ground, given how many people are alienated by Brexit and maybe alienated particularly by the way it's done, if it's done in a no-deal fashion?
Well, I obviously would much prefer to leave with a deal, but I accept the sort of logic of the argument that says if you have a deadline, you're more likely to get a deal, and because we tried the other ways and delayed and not got a deal, and it does seem to me that a significant contribution, not just to, if you like, disillusionment with the Conservative Party, but even more importantly, disillusionment with democratic politics as a whole, comes from the fact that we had a government that said for a long time, March 29th is the deadline, we're going to leave on March 29th, and then we didn't. That people think, well, what's the point of voting? And that's.
But you think no deal's a disaster waiting to happen. You don't think that's going to restore faith in people's in democracy?
Well, I think that if we continue to delay and delay and delay, then the people who voted for leave will say, we've been cheated out of it. We were told, here's a referendum. We voted to leave. I wish they hadn't, but they did. And they think, not unreasonably, that we're 3.5 years down the track, or just over 3 years down the track, and nothing has happened, and they are very suspicious. And that, I think, lies at the heart of a lot of the disillusionment with politics. And so, one way or another, Brexit will happen, and we will be beyond this debate.
Fucking hope it happens. It gets me angry, guys, that the broken promises, they should always keep to the promises to the people, but they don't. With the government and stuff.
Do you think we'll be back to normal politics, Philip? Or has this, as Nigel Farage and a lot of other people believe, utterly transformed our politics, Brexit, and we have moved to a Leave party and a Labour Party that maybe hasn't quite made the full journey to Remain party, but that will be the new cleavage in our politics?
Well, no, I don't think we're going to go back to politics as normal at all. The Conservative Party is, in essence, its strategy is to become the Leave party. It's trying to continue the administration. I'm sure you don't agree with this being the direction, but if I was in number 10, it was how do we copy the SNP and coalesce that Leave vote and get it enough constituencies and win more. We can only do that by squaring off the Brexit Party. We can only do that by going to no deal. And the Labour Party is all over the place. We can see this. They can't decide where they want to stand. The Liberal Democrats are now quite clearly the Remain party, and they've made that quite clear. I can sit here and tell you, there isn't a Brexit, deal or otherwise, that is good for my constituency. That's my judgment as the Member of Parliament for Bracknell. Now, knowing that, what do I do in those circumstances? What is the honourable thing to do? And I've made my move and my decision. And it wasn't on a personal level easy for lots of different reasons after so long. But fundamentally, this is the biggest issue in British politics. It's not going away. People are increasingly identifying themselves as Leave or Remain, not Conservative or Labour or Liberal. And so, yes, I do think it's going to redraw them out. How? That's a bigger question, and it depends on so many things, not least when the election takes place and in what context. But fundamentally, yes, I do believe that there are plate tectonics at play, things are shifting, boundaries are shifting, and I was straddling one of the San Andreas fault, and I felt
here's my feet
about it, and I just made a decision that actually it's better that I move.
What do you think the future holds for the people who signed Damien's letter, the people who identify as One Nation Tories and the Tory Party?
Well, again, it depends how the subsequent election plays out. It depends who comes back here afterwards. It depends on lots of different things. But looking at my own association that I was once a member of, it has changed profoundly in the last 12 months alone. The idea that those members are now going to choose a leader in the sort of hypothetical situation that Conservatives go into opposition, a leader that is in step with what Damien believes in the Conservative Party, I think is extremely unlikely.
Right there,
and so I think, I have a lot of regard for a number of Conservative colleagues who looked actually quite distressed from my new vantage point in the chamber over the last week or so. It's for them to make personal decisions. I don't judge them adversely. We all have to make personal decisions in this. But my own view is that politics is changing dramatically. And the party I've joined is more likely to have a brighter future than any hope that you're going to get back the Conservative Party I joined in 1992.
I want to come back to the party you joined, the conference you're about to go to. But on that point, Damien, about how your party has changed, you've got a leader who wants to have a people versus parliament election, not a slogan I could imagine you holding up in a banner as you walk down Ashford High Street. Am I right there?
That's. I mean, you say who wants to hold an election. That's an assertion.
It's a very clear piece of briefing from the people who were closest to him.
Well, but I mean, similarly this morning, I mean, to counteract that, I see that the people who do briefing at Number 10 have made it as clear as it can be that there's going to be no deal with Nigel Farage. So this particular idea has been knocked on the head this morning. So clearly, I think it will be wrong and indeed mad for the Conservative Party to try and sort of lock in with the Brexit Party. But I think there's one of the reasons, I disagree with Nigel Farage about practically everything, is the point about whether this changes politics forever. Of course, Brexit changes Britain forever, and therefore will change British politics forever. But the idea that future political parties will have to be based on the fault line of Brexit seems to me to be very questionable, precisely because when it happens, it will be an event. And so that event will have happened. And in 5, 10, 15 years' time, just defining yourself by one past event seems to me to be actually quite unlikely.
Isn't that what happened in the Scottish independence referendum? That it did actually transform politics. Of course, you get a bit of movement at the edges, but people do identify strongly with their referendum vote.
Sorry, just for a second, but in Scotland, you still have a Conservative Party and a Labour Party, both of them unionist parties, who still scrap over economics and all the other things we disagree on. And so there are people on the hard left who voted Brexit and people on the hard right who voted for Brexit. Now, it seems to me they can come together in the Brexit Party. The MEPs they had elected include Claire Francis, who used to work for Living Marxism and is an apologist for Slobodan Milosevic and things like that. Now, she can sit in a political party with Anne Widdecombe, but they sure as hell couldn't sit in a government together because they disagree about everything else. And after Brexit, the government of the day will have to agree, broadly speaking, on everything else. So I don't see this sort of simple transition of the Brexit debate into the future party system.
I have some sympathy with that. I don't think you can define yourself, I was a Remainer in 2035 if we Brexit. I get that. But I think Brexit is a manifestation of a broader change around being open or closed in terms of your view of the world. I mean, I look at today's announcement on foreign students and I welcome it because I disagree with it when it was first done. Yeah? I welcome it. Now, why has this happened? It's happened because
the idea of allowing students to stay longer when their course is finished.
The politics of it are obvious as to why they're doing it. They're trying to demonstrate that actually they're not closed, they're open for a variety of reasons. The problem is that the original referendum was won by being closed. It's essentially saying no more immigration, the poster, the infamous poster. And it's that's always, for me, been the problem with taking that mandate in 2016. If we were delivering a Brexit as a country that matched what 2016 Leave campaign was about, I'd have had less of a case. The reality is that what we're doing is we're taking those voters in the Midlands and the North who had problems with immigration, well documented, and we're saying to them, okay, we're going to deliver Brexit to meet that concern. And now we're going to announce that actually we're going to be
going to be what you thought it was.
Foreign students can come in, they can stack shelves, they can take your jobs and all the other stuff. I find that deeply reprehensible.
Damon, doesn't it? Boris Johnson's probably turned around to the cabinet yesterday and said, don't worry about me, I'm a Brexity Hezza, a reference to Heseltine. Is it possible to be both when you're trying to own a constituency that comes with values which you're then not going to follow with policy?
I mean, historically, yes is the answer, because there was a split. I mean, there were two Leave campaigns, don't forget. There was the official Leave campaign and there was the Farage, Aaron Banks Leave campaign. And it was the Farage campaign that did all the unacceptable.
But it was the official Leave campaign that had the Turkey accession nonsense. The two were working.
And talked about the Australian point system.
Yeah, they were working.
The Australian point system is one of the great, fantastic misunderstandings of modern politics. Australia has a much higher level of immigration than we do. We could introduce an Australian point system.
I don't think I'm misunderstanding. I know what they were up to. I mean, they were talking about the Australian point system because they knew that it would play to people's image of a white country. They weren't doing it for sophisticated policy reasons. And I had that from people who were at the top of the campaign. And so that goes back to the point. Can Boris Johnson really do what he very well want to do, which is be the much-loved metropolitan liberal when he's played the hard Brexit card.
But he is doing it. But whatever was said, and by whomever it was said in 2016, it is just a fact that today the British government, led by Boris Johnson, has relaxed the immigration system. It has, in the past 5 weeks, increased spending on health, increased spending on education, increased spending on the police. Whatever you think about any of those
He'll pull it off, you think?
These are not hard right policies. So, I mean, it's not that I'm not projecting into the future, because obviously I hope that post-Brexit we have a one-nation government led by Boris Johnson. But that he is pulling it off. He's doing it. And the one point where I part company, Philip just said that the government is sending a political signal by doing this. I think the government is doing this. Governments take actions. They don't just send political signals. And actually, changing the immigration system in this way and relaxing the rules for foreign students is quite a significant.
If Damien's right, you're going to be regretting your defection, aren't you?
Well, no, because the idea that last week was a career move on my part, I'm sorry.
No, but in terms of how he might be a one-nation leader.
I think there is a possibility that this is a winning ticket. My point, though, is that we are delivering Brexit because it successfully persuaded people on certain core issues, the take-back control stuff, which implied that we'd lost something, and immigration played a part, and also promising extra money because there was going to be a bounty to be had by Brexit. We now know there isn't a bounty to be had by Brexit. Everybody knows this. We now know the immigration policy isn't necessarily how it was sold to the broader public in 2016. And the take-back control thing was, well, hang on a minute, what are we actually losing by doing this? I mean, the debate has moved on, has become much more informed. And for me, as a Democrat, to take the consent, a narrow consent of the public in 2016, and to proceed with this project, which is deeply disruptive, I think is wrong. And you cannot ignore that core problem in British politics at the moment. And it's not solved by a general election. It has to be solved by consulting the public directly on that issue and seek their explicit consent.
Well, Damien's making the point, you might well be able to whistle both tunes. And wouldn't that shoot your political fox in a sense? Because if Boris Johnson does pull this off, he delivers Brexit, and he manages to tack back towards the centre, he sprays money around, builds infrastructure, bridges across places that probably don't need or shouldn't have bridges and the rest of it. He could pull it off.
And of course, the issue at the moment is the people who oppose all of this aren't one party. Okay, in the first past the post situation, everybody, it has to be some clever geek sitting in number 10 to conclude the bleeding obvious. Of course, if you coalesce and consolidate the lead vote, you've got a chance of winning. It doesn't mean that it's right and in the national interest. And yes, those of us on the opposition parties have to ask ourselves, how do we confront that? And I actually think my party is being quite straightforward. It's seeking a democratic mandate to stop Brexit. It doesn't say we'll stop it. Only we'll do it with a democratic mandate, which is in stark contrast to those who want to go forward with a no deal that quite clearly doesn't have an explicit democratic mandate.
If we leave the European Union, what's the point of the Liberal Democrats' view?
Well, the Liberal Democrats will still believe that being a member of the European Union is in the national interest.
That's a long march,
isn't it? Of course it is. So
of course it is. Day to day, what's the point of them for you?
For me, I've got it. You're asking me if there was more to it than Brexit. Of course there was more, and I looked at their approach on climate change. I looked at their approach on wanting to go cross-party on sorting out social care and healthcare. Everything I looked at, I thought, hang on a minute, that's actually where I am. When I was a justice minister, I had more support in front of me than I did behind. It's quite striking how many ex-justice ministers there are into the rebel group of Conservatives, and including me. We went through the process of realising the criminal justice system needed to be reformed, and yet we're struggling to get the support from people behind us to do so. I have, the main precipitant, of course, has been Brexit. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, would this ever happen? Of course, I would not have envisaged it. However, when you actually look at where the Tory party has gone, and I know Damien doesn't want that, and I respect that, and where the Liberal Democrats sit, for me, it was a very comfortable move to make in policy terms.
It's not just that I don't want it. I sort of can see that it's not happening. That absolutely. Social care is one of the issues which is very dear to my heart. I've written pamphlets on it and so on. And absolutely, I both in government and since have been talking to Norman Lamb and Liz Kendra and people across that.
You were mentally ticking off all the things Philip was talking about and saying those are all on your agenda.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't need to join the Liberal Democrats to have them on your agenda. And since the Conservative Party is in government, you'll actually get more done in the Conservative Party. And you know, any on social care, I mean, a classic example. Anyone recognises that just as with the pension system, because the changes you make will take 25, 30 years actually to come into effect, you've got to have some kind of cross-party consensus. The same is true on social care, same is true with lots of issues, climate change is another one.
Can I ask you, because you had some experience talking to the DUP in government under Theresa May, they've gone strangely diplomatic and quiet, which is not always the natural resting position of the DUP senior politicians. Do you think something is afoot and there are manoeuvres going on and there is scope for something that would look closer to the Northern Ireland, to the all-Ireland approach to a Brexit deal and not the UK harmonisation with EU rules? Could we be looking at something like that, even though it might be massaged and disguised?
The honest answer is I don't know. I'm not party to these talks, and those who are party to them are keeping them close very sensibly. I think I do. It's where I disagree with some of my oldest and closest friends in politics. I think the government is serious about trying to get a deal. I think that you know, whatever manoeuvrings are going on, whatever negotiations are going on, both in terms of negotiating with the European Union and, if you like, negotiations with the DUP as well, they are happening, and they are happening because the government and the Prime Minister do want a deal.
And did you look into Boris Johnson's eyes? Some people did and were convinced by that, or you didn't have to be summoned in for that meeting to be persuaded?
I had a meeting with him, and I mean,
he's supposed to be the most optimistic person in the building, talking about more than 50% chance.
I smiled inwardly when Ruth Davidson said she looked into his eyes, because I'd sort of done the same thing, and yeah, he wants to do.
And that swung you?
Well, it didn't swing me. I mean, yeah, he always
said. You believed him?
He wanted a deal. Yes. Yes, I think
he's not someone people always trust or believe.
Well, I think it is in the country's interest, therefore the government's interest, therefore the Prime Minister's interest, to have a deal. I mean, in every way.
It's the logic you trusted, not the eyes.
Well, it's both. That you know, it's absolutely the logical position for anyone running the British government, accepting the verdict of the people that we need to leave the European Union. That let's do a deal that enables us to get on to sign a decent trade deal with them while we're trying to sign decent trade deals with the rest of the world as well. Everything, you know, life will be much easier if we leave with a deal.
Quick answer on to both of you. Philip, you presumably will be standing in the next general election when it comes as a Liberal Democrat. Do you worry about the pro-Remain side of the ledger at the moment, the parties on that side and their ability to work in any way together, or encourage their supporters to look at certain websites and vote tactically and the rest of it, and that you could be mullered by forces on the Leave side which just manage somehow to coordinate or coalesce better than you do?
Look, there's plenty going on to address that obvious challenge. Are we 100% the right place yet? No. I think we need a much more. It's one thing to stop Brexit, but you need a positive narrative to try to address the legitimate concerns that people had up and down the country, which led to that Brexit vote. And I think, you know, there's always work to do in politics, Gary. But ultimately, I've detected a mood change in the Thames Valley region over the last 18 months, 2 years. And I think that the public have woken up to the reality of what Brexit is likely to be, not what they've been promised. They're obviously angry with politicians for not sorting it out. A lot of people say, just get on with it, get it done. Sometimes I think it's misinterpreted as meaning deliver Brexit. It actually probably means just stop talking about it, and I don't really care what it means, just stop talking about it. So I do sense a mood change, and that's why, I mean, I don't actually, I mean, predicting an outcome of a general election at the moment is a fool's errand. And what I'm hopeful of is, to end on a positive note, actually, is that if we get to the other side, the two of us actually will be working together on those issues that actually transcend 5-year term limits, social care and things like that, so we can get back to governing the country well, because at the moment, where we are is just not a good place as a country politically, it really isn't.
Damien, general election, do you think that even without doing a handshake deal with Nigel Farage, the chances of Boris Johnson being able to coalesce Leave voters, which is clearly the strategy, better than the other side, does have a chance of consolidating the vote on that side and delivering him a majority, even though the numbers at the moment don't look like that. It could be there at the end of a campaign. There's a chance.
Yeah, I think everything the past few years has told us that the numbers now are unlikely to be the same as the numbers at the end of an election campaign. And the other thing, and it seems an extraordinary thing to say now, but I will essay it as a sort of wild thought for the end of this, is that it's conceivable that the election campaign won't be all about Brexit, and actually other matters will intrude as well, and that therefore talking about Leave and Remain coalitions may feel slightly last month's thing by the time we get to an election.
And you'll probably be judging Boris Johnson differently, but 2 months into his premiership, marks out of 10. Philip.
Well, I'll try to be objective. I mean, I'm trying to be generous. Maybe 1, maybe 2.
I have long refused to answer marks out of 10 questions on any circumstances in any political subject, and I think I will maintain consistency in this matter. I think Boris is doing very well.
Seasoned veteran answer. Thank you both, and thank you for letting us sit in your office. But thanks very much indeed.
Oh, that went pretty well, but who would know? I think it went well. Where's next? I think where's the next? Or next channel or something. Moving on to David Cameron.
I love this country, and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
And with that, David Cameron was off, the morning after the referendum, which will define his political career. We've seen precious little of our former Prime Minister since his dramatic fall from power. He's been shy of the cameras.
No time to talk, I'm afraid now.
As Brexit turmoil has convulsed the country. But 3 years on, his long-awaited memoirs will shortly be published. In a newspaper interview to launch them, he defends calling the referendum, but speaks of his enduring pain at how it all unfolded. He says he knows that some people will never forgive him for holding the referendum, that every single day he thinks about that vote and the fact his side lost. Boris Johnson and Michael Gove get both barrels over the £350 million on the bus. He says they left the truth at home. It all turned into a terrible Tory drama, he says, and he's desperately worried about what's going to happen next. His old friend Daniel Finkelstein, who interviewed him for the book, says Cameron knew he was taking a huge gamble.
He's very affected by it. He thinks it's very serious. Lots of people in the country are, and he feels no differently to that, but he feels, in addition, a sense of personal responsibility.
It was just a year after winning a historic election victory for the Conservatives that his political career ended. He also left his safe seat in Parliament.
I've decided the right thing to do is to stand down as the Member of Parliament for Witney.
Voters in his constituency were conflicted about his legacy.
It was a big mistake, and a sign of his arrogance that he called a referendum that he was sure that he would win without actually bothering to know any of the facts.
He couldn't have been a better local MP, but I think he made a mistake there. He's made a mess of things, and it was for a political party again.
He did a runner. Theresa May, even though she was one for in, she decided that she would try to fight for it and showed more backbone than he ever did.
Labour MPs hoping for a second referendum feel David Cameron only has himself to blame.
Personally, I don't know how David Cameron sleeps at night. It's for him to say he basically doesn't regret, he shouldn't regret the hour, is an insult. I have constituents who've lost their jobs because of his decision. He was too weak.
Mr Cameron said his opponents on the Leave side acted appallingly during the campaign, but left some of his fiercest criticism for the way his successor is behaving now. He said practices like the prorogation of Parliament have rebounded badly and that a no-deal Brexit isn't a good idea. But today his successor wished David Cameron well.
I think he has a very distinguished record and a legacy to be proud of. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Well, it's true.
Well,
right. As all Prime Ministers know, you can never predict
one
how
say?
it will end. Tomorrow on Sky News.
My controller's gone flat on my remote, but hopefully I can sort of change the channel over for a hint second. Just give me a second, guys. I need to change my controllers over. The thing's gone low on the controller, see. You may have just seen it for a second, it hasn't, but it has. So I need to... Wait a second. Right, switch to other user. What I'm doing is switching the controllers over. If it would let me, but the screen's frozen. Turn off device. There we go. Yeah.
The election campaign, if MPs had let him start one, Boris Johnson today had to answer a question no Prime Minister wants to hear. He had to respond to yesterday's judgment by Scotland's
There you go, see, pad's coming back on.
Court, suggesting he met...
Right, so I'm just trying to think here of what else we could be showing on this video. Because my phone's on low battery as well. It seems to always keep going on low battery. Go for Nigel farage.
This constituency, like nearly all of them in the northeast, voted to leave. But this constituency, like nearly all of them in the northeast, is represented by a member of parliament who is fanatical about forcing you to vote again in a second referendum and overturning the result and making us vote Remain. If you want to see the difference between the smug faces of those in Westminster who feel so pleased and proud that they've managed to stop us leaving effectively on the 31st of October, to stop us in the short term. Don't worry, sir, we're going to get there, all right? Who feel so smug and content, they've even stopped us in the short term, having a general election. They think in London SW1 they're doing a great job. Well, I suggest they come to Sedgefield. I suggest they come out to the country where they will discover that we are disgusted by their behaviour. The Labour Party promised in their 2017 manifesto they would not just respect the result of the referendum, but they would, if they got into government, deliver on the result of that referendum. And where are we today? We saw Emily Thornberry. Well, you can boo. Richard spent an hour sitting next to her. I mean... So the Thornberry policy, and it's brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant. A Labour government will negotiate a new deal, put it to the British people in a second referendum, and then campaign against it. Work that out. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? Then we had Mr. Corbyn yesterday at the TUC, telling us that the Labour government will now, despite all their pledges and promises to the contrary, a Labour government will now hold a second referendum and give us the choice between Remain and what he calls a credible leave option. What he means is it'll be Remain or a version of Mrs May's appalling new European treaty that rightly was voted down 3 times by Parliament. Corbyn, if he wins the next election, doesn't even want to give us the option in a second referendum of genuinely breaking free. And that to me is a complete betrayal of 5 million Labour voters who voted for them in 2017, believing they deliver on the referendum. To be in no doubt in these northern constituencies, most of which have been Labour forever, be in no doubt that we will be in an all-out political fight with a Labour Party who've broken their word, lied to the people, betrayed many of their most traditional voters. We are in an all-out political war with the Labour Party, and quite right too. And what of the Conservative Party? Well, thank goodness for the Brexit Party, because if we weren't here... Is that the best you can do for the Brexit Party? Are you ready? It's all right, they've woken up now, we're okay. And what of the Conservative Party? Well, we had 3 years of Theresa May as Prime Minister, who doesn't just go down as the worst Prime Minister in history, she also goes down as the most dishonest and duplicitous Prime Minister in history as well. And if it wasn't for the Brexit Party, she'd probably still be Prime Minister. So Boris Johnson came in on the back of our spectacular success in the European elections. And Boris began by injecting a bit of energy and a bit of optimism into the job, much needed, and indeed saying many of the right things, indeed parroting much of what we'd said during the European elections. I thought, well, you know, imitation is quite a nice form of flattery in a way. But Boris Johnson, for all the bravado, for all the we will leave on the 31st of October, do you remember? Do or die? Gosh, I thought this chap looks pretty good, you know. Even said he'd be prepared to die in a ditch, not to extend. And yet, what is it we're now beginning to hear from Boris Johnson? We're hearing that it is now the overwhelming priority of this country to get a withdrawal agreement, by which he means Mrs May's withdrawal agreement with a few changed words around the backstop. Even without the backstop, that withdrawal agreement is a new European treaty, binding in international law, under which we will never become a free nation. We will never become a genuine independent democracy. And if Boris Johnson carries on down that route of trying to force through that withdrawal agreement, of trying to tie us to European rule books with no say, for goodness knows how long to come that will be. He might think he's clever. He might stand up and say, I've delivered Brexit, if he forces it through the House of Commons, but it will be nothing more than Brexit in name only, and nothing less than a betrayal of this nation.
Well, that was interesting, as one would say to me. Nigel Farage's speaking. Now, let's see what this is all about. Let's see. Like I say, guys, trying to find what I'm going to do a lot more videos about this. But there's only so much room I've got on the phone here. I could do more videos, but yeah. Thank you for joining me in this video, guys. Hope you've all enjoyed it. And please like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos with your friends. And I will catch you on the next one. Take it easy, guys. Peace. And thank you for joining me again. Peace.